G'day everyone, and welcome to the third video for week 7 of our admin law course. This week we're looking at the grounds for review, and we've already covered heaps. So far this week we've looked at errors of law, we've looked at the requirement to consider all the relevant evidence and none of the irrelevant evidence, and we've looked at the no evidence rule. In this video we're going to look at 2 grounds for review which come into play when the decision maker is behaving improperly. We call these acting for an improper purpose and acting in bad faith. We'll start with the lesser of 2 evils, which is improper purpose. Section 52C of the ADJR Act says that a decision maker is acting with an improper purpose if they exercise a power for a purpose other than the purpose for which the power is conferred. So this ground for review assumes that every power which is given to an administrative decision maker is given to them for some purpose. And when they make the decision, they're only allowed to have that purpose in mind. They're not allowed to focus on some other purpose. An example might help here. So let's go straight back to the logbook example we've been looking at all along. Let's say that our decision-making delegate has walked into work and they've got 20 logbooks to review. But on the way to work, they were listening to the radio in the car and they were listening to a report about the increased release of greenhouse gases due to motor vehicle use. And they suddenly realised they can strike a blow for the environment by simply rejecting all of these logbooks. They'll go through them with a fine-tooth comb and find any excuse they can to reject the logbook. Now, pretty clearly, the process of reviewing logbooks has a purpose. And that purpose is to ensure that the learner driver has done enough hours of driving that they can safely be given a provisional licence. The purpose has nothing to do with global warming. So even though our decision maker is completely motivated by the intention of being a good citizen and supporting the government's greenhouse gas objectives, they're using their power for a purpose other than the purpose for which it was conferred. They need to stick to considering whether the young driver is ready to be safe on the road. Now, all of this assumes that we can actually tell what the purpose of the legislation is. This is where our purposive interpretation becomes so important. Remember purposive interpretation? We look at the intrinsic and the extrinsic guides to the purpose of a piece of legislation. Intrinsic guides like the purposes clause, and extrinsic guides like maybe the explanatory statement tabled by the minister. If we can clearly discover the purpose and the power was used for some other purpose, then the power has been used invalidly. In a case called Arthur Yates and Company against the Vegetable Seeds Committee, the committee was established to ensure the supply of vegetable seeds as the nation tried to feed itself during the Second World War. Everyone had their backyard vegetable garden, which was intended to take pressure off the farming industry, which had lost many workers to the defence forces and the munitions industries, and which still had to supply our soldiers and our allies overseas. So the powers of the committee were given to it in order that it might regulate the seed industry. What happened though was that the committee basically set itself up in the seed trading business in competition with the companies it was regulating. They did this for noble reasons because they felt it was the best way to distribute the seeds, but the enactment never contemplated them doing anything more than regulating the activities of other companies. Competing with those companies by actually selling seed was found to be a purpose other than the purpose for which the power was conferred. The decision to sell seed directly was invalid. Bad faith is one step worse. When a public servant acts for the wrong purpose, they're still trying to do the right thing by the public. When a decision maker acts in bad faith, that's no longer true. They're acting with some ulterior motive. Bad faith is often aligned with things like corruption. So if our logbook inspector quietly let it be known to the driving schools in the area that logbooks would be much more likely to be passed if the applicant slipped a $20 note inside the front cover, well, the inspector would be acting in bad faith. Bad faith also occurs where a decision maker doesn't even make an honest attempt at a proper decision. Sticking with the logbook example, if the decision maker just walked in every morning and approved every logbook without even looking at them, that would be an easy morning's work, but it would be bad faith. The key authorities for bad faith in Australia come from 2 immigration cases. They have weird titles because the names of the applicants were kept confidential and replaced with meaningless strings of letters. In the first case, SBAU against the minister, the Refugee Review Tribunal made some really odd decisions about whether a family from Iran, who were part of a minority religion, were being persecuted. One of the grounds was bad faith, the suggestion that the tribunal had not made an honest attempt at the decision. The court reviewed the earlier authorities, and then this case was picked up in a second immigration case, SBBS against the minister, which primarily concerned the question of whether an applicant was from Afghanistan or from Pakistan. In SBBS, the court distilled the findings of SBAU down into a series of 9 beautiful, simple, understandable propositions. They are as follows. First, bad faith is a serious allegation of personal fault, so it implies a personal falling short, perhaps even malice. Second, because it's such a serious allegation, bad faith must be clearly alleged and clearly proved. As a lawyer, you won't allow your client to go forward with an allegation of bad faith unless you genuinely believe the evidence is there to support the allegation. Third, bad faith cannot be conclusively defined. The ways of evil are many and varied. Instead, we look for the characteristics in this list. Fourth, the absence of honesty is often crucial. If the person is acting honestly, we say that they're acting in good faith. If our logbook decision maker had been told that their job was simply to record the names on the front of the logbooks and issue approvals, well then they still wouldn't be acting in bad faith, even if they didn't review the contents. They'd obviously still be failing to consider relevant evidence, but it wouldn't be bad faith because they weren't acting dishonestly. Fifth, bad faith is rare and extreme. It's not popular to say this, but in Australia, we have one of the most highly skilled, efficient, and ethical public services in the world. Bad faith might sometimes happen and we should guard for it, but it's rare and extreme. Sixth, bad faith is distinct from poor decision making. Someone might make a bad decision, but that's a question for merits review. Someone can make a poor decision whilst at the same time doing their level best to make a good decision. Similarly, seventh, errors are not bad faith. If our logbook assessor refuses to approve a logbook, but then it becomes clear that they inadvertently miscalculated the hours of driving done by the learner driver, this is an error and it needs to be corrected, but it's not bad faith. Eighth, bad faith is to be inferred from the conduct, not from the decision. A decision made in good faith and a decision made in bad faith will often look exactly the same. I mean, your logbook is approved. It's the conduct engaged in by the decision maker to get there that makes the difference. Ninth, and finally, the decision maker need not know that the decision was wrong. A decision maker might believe that they made the right decision, even though it turns out the decision was made in bad faith. So let's say our logbook decision maker has a neighbour with a learner driver teenager. And often, when our decision maker is walking the dog in the mornings, they saw the learner driver heading out for a practice session before much traffic was about. The logbook comes in and our decision maker thinks, well, I already know this kid's done a lot of practice, and the decision maker approves the logbook without looking at it. Turns out the neighbour's kid has not done 10 hours at night, and so the decision to approve was an error. Can you see that the decision maker honestly believed at the time of the decision that the decision was correct, but it was still made in bad faith because the decision maker did not make a genuine attempt to properly assess the decision. So there we go. We now know from this week that a decision is invalid if there's an error of law. We know the decision is invalid if there's no evidence for an important fact, or if the decision maker doesn't consider all the relevant evidence and none of the irrelevant evidence. And now we know that a decision is invalid if it's made in pursuit of a purpose other than the purpose prescribed in the enactment, or if it's made in bad faith. In the next video, we're going to look at what we call discretionary decisions and the way they can go wrong. There really is a lot of information coming at you this week. Just keep hanging in there. You can do this.